But obviously on the last video I talked about squatting and in particular tight muscles for guys obviously being here. And just kind of like to briefly touch on the reasoning for that. Let me go to my box quickly. So in my experience what I've found is that guys have a habit of sitting like that. Okay? Women tend to often have a habit of sitting like that, or kind of like this. Okay? So when people then come into the gym, they do a lot of exercises like squatting, obviously talked about in the last video, without kind of paying respect to what they've been doing for the 8 hours or 10 hours, etc. of the day beforehand. So just thinking about that, kind of obviously in that position for 8 hours with the feet out, etc., that will put you in a position of obviously sort of that sort of external rotation of the hip, and then the body being a biological organism that it is will adapt to its environment. So then you come into the gym and you try and squat. What will kind of happen is these kind of ugly, horrible squats where you kind of come over like that. You get very quadricep heavy. The squats, obviously, I talked about in the video last time about keeping the feet, you know, making sure the adductors on the inner thigh are nice and tight, draw the navel in, nice and tight, and almost kind of initially getting this sort of movement and then sitting back to load up the posterior chain of muscles, so the glutes and the hamstrings. Obviously, for me, just to, again, from my background, I used to do quite a lot of deadlifting, still kind of do, to a point where I knackered in my lower back. And after a lot of research and a lot of like painstaking different bits and pieces, I figured out that essentially, again, human beings being a biological organism, I'd kind of adapted to this environment of sitting down too much, and my deadlifts kind of looked a lot like this sort of movement going on. So my lower back was very unhappy. Glutes and hamstrings weren't really doing a lot because I'm sat down all day turning them off, lengthening them, not firing the core, etc. So initially, for me, with a lot of clients and a lot of people, they need to go through a phase of, you could call it rehabilitation. I'd rather sort of like just sort of strip things back to the beginning and almost sort of starting again. So before you squat, before you deadlift, as I said last week, if you're finding yourself in this sort of position where you're like this, or maybe one foot in particular is going off to the side because you spend all day kind of sat like that, etc., you've essentially adapted to that environment, which is fine, but just pay respect to that. Don't go in the gym for 20 minutes with the intention to kill yourself. Go into the gym to kind of like spend 10 minutes rehabbing yourself, I guess is one way of putting it, and rebuilding yourself. Unlock these, what we call fascia barriers. So fascia, this little layer that's built up and made your body adapt to that level. And then you'll see what you're really capable of, which for me, that's been an enlightening journey. I don't really kind of just do all my exercises in this plane of motion anymore. I like to try and increase the potential of my body and try and move through multiple planes of direction. I won't go too much into that whole multi-plane stuff today because I'll cover that in other videos. So this is kind of the start of using this sort of tool, foam roller, or obviously we've got a med ball over there for a bit of myofascical release. So these bits of kit are in a lot of gyms, and a lot of people use them, but like a lot of things, a lot of people don't really know why they're using them. Maybe they say they do, but they actually don't. The way I use them, and the way I've very successfully used them, in my opinion, for my own body and with clients, is just as I say, that fascia layer that's causing me to be like so, just break that down, break that down, break that down, and then initially cause a much better gait of movement, so the gait between my thighs as I walk, so rather than being out like here, like some sort of waddling sort of animal, I go back to being more of a three-dimensional being, a human being, and I can move more efficiently. I can squat better, I can deadlift, and I've got much more channeling up through the centre midline of my body, just going back to sort of like an anatomical sort of movement. And it makes me engage more muscles. So for today, the only real area I want to focus on is this sort of like back sort of hip area. So where we've got sort of like, we've got our glutes, we've got the kind of glute maximus, which is a big muscle, and the glute medius coming around the outside, glute minimus in here. And quite deep around here, we've got kind of like a muscle called the piriformis, which research has told me, and I've kind of figured is responsible for that sort of like external rotation, lateral movement of the leg. So all I do, very simply, is I get on this foam roller and bring the leg up like so, leaning in. What a lot of people tend to do is they kind of go like that, and that doesn't really do anything because you're getting in here. And just move. Now you might find that you get the pain in there. Now there's two different things. Anyone that's ever been for a sports massage or any sort of physio will know the difference between having a dense patch of tight knotted muscle, etc., or fascia pushed on compared to pain. Now for me, the best way to sum it up is if it feels sort of like almost like really uncomfortable, but like you're getting some sort of relief from that area, that's fascia. That's your body fighting you, so you've got to fight it. If it feels like someone's pinching you or stabbing you, then clearly something's not quite right and stop straight away. And if you do find that, by all means, contact me, because I'll quickly be able to clear things up for you a little bit. So get into position, and we're going to kind of, as I say, that kind of glute medius area, and we're just going to push the foam roller in and get to the point where we find the dense fascia. Getting in like so. So for me, okay, and we're back after a little bit of a camera malfunction. So as I was saying, so we get into this position, we find the point of discomfort and we hold it there. Now, as I obviously described in the previous video just a second ago, you need to attack that discomfort. Now, you'll probably get to here and it will feel like someone's kind of like almost attacking you a little bit. But again, just go after it. You've got to break up that layer, otherwise you won't achieve that level of movement. Again, think of it as something blocking you, as if someone's kind of taped you up, and you've got to break that down, so you've got to cut away that tape, and then that'll allow you to go from being here to pulling back round. So plenty of rolling on there. If you find that isn't doing anything, this is why I've got the med ball. If you find that isn't doing anything, it probably means that, as I kind of said earlier, the big muscles on top are fine, but it's more, as I said, there's little muscles in between, the little hip flexor muscles, or the piriformis in particular. So exactly the same position, it's got to have a bit more balance. So you get in like so, and you go to there, and for me that's about right. So I'd try and hold that for literally as long as I could, initially, and then over time, just tiny little movements, literally, that's it. And then the other thing, myofascical release is great, but you've got to follow it up with some sort of stretching, because otherwise you'll just go back to your day job, literally, and undo all the work that you've done. So, go away. So, this position for an excellent stretch, one leg over the other, pull round, just pull into you, and pull in, and you'll feel that in the area is released, essentially. Pull that stretch, just to stretch out that muscle that's now had its boundaries taken away. Nice and comfortable, hold that stretch for as long as you can, 30 seconds. Same thing on the other side, exactly the same. Get back up, see where you are. Okay? A minute of release on each side. 3 sets of 30 seconds of stretching on each side. Absolutely perfect. Do that over time and see how you get on. I do guarantee, that's how confident I am, that you'll start finding more hip movement, especially if you do things like kettlebell swings, squatting, deadlifting, better movement for your walking, for your running. It will improve absolutely everything. Okay, that's me done. As always, please like and share the videos. I do put a fair bit of effort into putting these together. I really appreciate any feedback anyone likes to offer. So like and share. Next week's video, I'll be away, but I'll be putting something together for you all. Thank you very much. Cheers.